Hi there and welcome to this video on Practice Labs. In our previous versions we've given you an overview on how to connect to a Windows Server environment. Today what I wanted to show you was just some of the different technologies that we cover, and we'll jump into a Cisco based lab and then we'll move on to some of the more advanced technologies, maybe something around VMware. So the structure of accessing courseware is always the same. So I've logged into the labs already and we've gone through that process in previous videos on how you connect to this interface. Now we're going to jump in specifically to a Cisco course. Again, same structure. We'll have an introduction at the top of the page and then these lab guides. And just a reminder on what the lab guides are. We look at the exam objectives defined by the vendor, in this case Cisco. We then take each of those objectives and we try and write a piece of learning content, practical learning content, to solidify the understanding of the exam objective. And that's what ultimately builds out the list of lab guides. Again, just a little reminder in terms of notifications that we have on the page. So we have the information panel, which is displayed on the right-hand side. You can close, don't show again. And we're going to jump into the first module, or the first lab guide in the Cisco course. So as we go in, we now have a new level where we told what exercises we'll be covering in this particular lab guide, and let's jump into that. So I'm going to go ahead and close this panel just on the right hand side and talk a little bit more about the Cisco Practice Lab. So where we differ from some of the other vendors in the space is we're offering you access to real routers and switches, as if you went and purchased it and put it on your desk next to your PC and plugged your either your computer or your laptop into it. It's the same type of experience. So you get access to these 3 routers, 3 switches, and a Windows Server in the lab configuration as well. And people always ask me, well, why would you put a Windows Server in a Cisco lab? As the technologies advance and change, some of the Cisco tools, in terms of managing routers and switches, are actually installed on a server and are GUI based, which makes it a little bit easier for people who are not that familiar with the command line interface. So that's what you actually get to work on. However, if we have a look at the lab diagram here, you'll notice that there's a lot more shared infrastructure as well. So you have the ability to build WANs, configure a Cisco IP phone, link the switches together, and then you can see in the lab diagram here how the Windows box is actually connected up. So let's go ahead and start up a router and let's actually start up everything in this lab and see what it gives us. So as I power on each of these, you can see a new terminal window just open up in the console viewer. And I can power on individually or use the power on all option just in the tools bar at the bottom there. And we get some feedback, and well, the labs are, the Cisco labs are quite slow to start up. Going back to my earlier point, this is kind of real Cisco hardware. There's not much we can do with the boot process. This is how it happens. So the stuff that you actually get into your console here is what you would see if it was sitting right next to you. So it takes a couple of minutes for everything to initialize, to get to a position to start your configuration. Now, in the early stages of the Cisco lab guides, you're taken through how to configure interfaces, how to do some of the basic functionality. As the lab guides become more complicated, we don't expect you to go and set the lab configuration up. We actually go ahead and pre-configure the devices with the right IP schemes, any VLAN configuration, any kind of security context that needs to be applied to it. We do that for you up front, and that boot process may take a little bit longer. So when we're talking about, in this case, 2 or 3 minutes, it may take 4 or 5 minutes for a Cisco lab to be fully started up, config applied, and then in a position for you to carry out your work on. So let's just have a look at what is covered actually within these lab guides. So we'll go ahead and just close the window. You can see you're working on Cisco 3750 series switches. There's a 2960 switch in this particular lab guide that you'll be working on. I've kind of used it as a bit of a sandbox. So I've kind of started 4 of the devices. If I was following the actual lab guide in terms of configuration I should be using, I should just start up the device called NY-Access 1 and the Windows server. So we'll power on that in any case. Go have a look at where we are in the lab guide. And then let's have a look if we've got to a point here where we can actually do something on the command line interface. So as you can see, the first device is now ready. The system configuration dialog box is there. Do we want to run through the initial configuration, yes or no? I'll leave that up to you to decide. In my case, during the demo, I'll say no. And then you'll see you have access to the device, and the second one's asking me for some information as well. So the new scrolling function, it makes it quite easy to access the different consoles. And here I am at the interface, and I'm not a Cisco expert, but let's just do a show run to give you an understanding of what configuration there is. So that's a little overview of the Cisco environment. I think you'll agree there's quite a lot of infrastructure there for you to develop those practical skills that you need if you're moving into the world of networking. Why don't we have a look at now something, another advanced topic that we cover. Let's have a look at one of the VMware courses, and in particular we'll jump into the vSphere 6 course that we have, or practice lab. So again, you may or may not see this in your list of courses available to you, depending on what you have purchased. But same process again, I select the practice lab title. I then have the range of lab guides that I would like to work on. And as I actually go into, let's have the first one, go into the second one here, vSphere security, you'll see my lab has actually changed configuration, and I now have a number of different devices available to me. So let's just kind of touch on the VMware layout. So for those of you who are new to this technology, this is a virtualization software suite, and in this particular lab, you have access to some key components. One, a domain controller to manage authentication for the virtual center. So you have a fully installed instance of Virtual Center, licensed enterprise level. These are the components that are not so easy to set up on your own labs at home. You then have an application server which kind of manages some of the additional VMware components that we run. And then most importantly, you have 3 ESX hosts. So 2 running in this particular case, vSphere 6, and then an older version that you have the ability to update. And then the great thing within the environment is you do have some shared storage, and the shared storage gives you the ability to carry out some of the advanced topics like vMotioning. I'm sure you've heard those type of things, high availability concepts. And we have lab guides that cover those things, and you'll actually see it in operation, moving a virtual guest from one host to another. So what I'm going to do is let me just power on the remainder of the devices, just so you get an understanding of what the interface looks like and how you would actually access the VMware tools. So we're just going to give it a minute, and then we're going to come back to the video. So once the practice lab environment has powered on and all the services are ready for your virtual center, you'll be presented with the console. I just wanted to give you a quick overview of how you connect to the vSphere environment. So you can either use the full client, or as we've seen in a lot of the content now, you can actually use the web clients as well. So there's lots of flexibility in how you can use it. Again, please feel free to use the lab guides. They're there to give you the structured direction. However, you can use it as the sandbox environment to go and test or just refresh some knowledge on specific VMware components that you might not touch all the time. So hopefully this has given you a good overview of what we do for some of the different technologies in terms of our Cisco Wing practice labs or the VMware practice labs. Thanks very much for watching.